and welcome to Cut the Chit Chat, a podcast that gets to the point with people I find interesting. I'm your host, Anna Moyers, and this episode is coming to you from Denver, Colorado. With me today is my guest, Chris Luther. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Miss Moyers.
So the reason I find you interesting is because you strive to live a wild life. You suck the marrow out of life just by living and sharing your passions. You encourage others to do the same. You are your students' Mr. Keating from Dead Poets Society. You've helped myself and so many others find passion in their work. You help them see their potential and help us appropriately question the status quo and demand a better world for ourselves. You have done so all while leading by example. You are a light to those around you. You make people feel seen, heard, and loved. And although you're a one-man wolf pack, it has been really beautiful to watch the way you love your children and your fake children like myself along the way. So, thanks for being here.
Wow, you are welcome. The Robin Williams reference is a little humbling because I love him and that character.
It is a really good one.
I would like it on the record that a lot of the background noise you may hear on this podcast is because of me. I have chosen a location outdoors because I like to be outdoors.
Well,
so
there we go.
There it is.
Have it no other way.
No other way. So
me covered in slobber and
slobber from Merlin, the little old English bulldog we have hanging out with us.
So bear with us as you hear our fun noises, but the view is great. All right, Chris, well, so maybe you can just give us a little bit of background of who you are and how you've gotten to this place in your life.
Sure. Okay, so I currently work at Concordia University in Seward, Nebraska. I work in the Department of Health and Human Performance. I work with all of our recreation and sports studies majors. So within our department, we have 3 different majors. We have exercise science, public health and fitness, and recreation and sports studies. So my job is to kind of wrangle all the cats in the recreation and sports studies arena. And then I'm also the assistant coach with the women's soccer team there. So soccer has been a very big part of my life and my identity, I think. And so I still like to connect with people through that medium, if that's what you want to call it. Yeah. So let's see, my history, I'll try to give it a quick one. I was born in Texas. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. We moved all over. My dad was an employee of IBM for a long time, which they say outside of military and preachers, IBM moved the most.
Wow.
So they moved us all over. California, Illinois, ended up the majority of my upbringing in Montana. And that's kind of, my mother is kind of this mountain hippie, so from Utah, so that's kind of where I get that aspect of my personality. So I like to tell people, my dad, when I was born, my dad worked for NASA through IBM. And so I like to tell people that I'm the literal byproduct of a rocket scientist and a mountain hippie. So that's
that tracks.
Right. So I think that kind of gives a kind of a good view of that. But when I was younger, going through school, I went through 3 different major thought processes as far as what academic plan I wanted to go through, and ended up in an education track. And I have always loved people. I love being around people. I'm obviously, from your experiences with me, probably could guess I'm an extrovert. I get energy from relationships, although I can spend time by myself and do the lone wolf thing. The pack is important to me.
Yeah, of course.
So so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Well, that's super cool. I'm glad to be a part of your cool life journey, and it's awesome to see all the different people you've helped along the way and got to be part of their lives, and just the way you've even grown as a professional too.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So great. Well, happy to have you here. Excited to have some hard conversations with you.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous.
Hey, you'll be fine.
My opinions.
So how we do things here on this show is we have a jar full of hard-hitting discussion topics, a few of which have been specifically tailored to you, and we'll take turns discussing them openly, and we'll just have a good time doing it. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, let's begin.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, you want to go ahead and go first?
Oh God, I go first?
Yay.
So I pull and I ask you the question.
Yeah.
Oh, we're getting right after
All right, let's hear.
All right,
I'm
you
here
ready?
for it. Mm-hmm.
Anna Moyers.
Okay.
Your first question is, what do you think is broken about the United States education system. Slap. Let's go.
LOL. Well, let's start off by saying I currently am not working in the United States education system, so that might be a a good guess as to how I feel about it right now. No, I'm obviously a product of the U.S. education system, but I also currently live and work abroad. And I think that it's very interesting to see, the school I work at now in Rwanda is an American school. So we follow very similar traditions and ideals. And I think that there's a lot of things that the United States' education system does well. For example, I think that they're one of the leading countries in taking care of students with special needs and helping students who are learning English as a foreign language or a second language. So I think there are things that the United States does a really good job at. However, I think what we did is an area of our greatest weakness is that we think that we're doing it right. End of sentence. I think we have kind of chosen to do education the same way that we've been doing it for so long and are not really mixing it up. There are things that we are open to innovation in, but I also think that there's other countries doing a really good job at education, and I think we kind of get stuck in the way that we have been doing things for so long that we aren't willing to try new radical things,
So like a fear of change.
Yeah, there is definitely a fear of change, but also it's maybe not so much a fear of change, but as like we are right.
So why change?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think there are some people who are movers and shakers and are trying to do things differently, but I just don't see there being like enough desire to want to change radically and try new things. And if there is, they might be in like charter schools or magnet schools, and those guys I think are willing to try different things, but I think our standard way of education doesn't work for a lot of students.
Right.
It worked for me. I mean, I succeeded really well in school. It works for a lot of students, but it doesn't work for every student.
Is that because you learned how to play the game?
Yes, 100%.
Right.
Things that I learned in school, I just learned how to learn, I think, the way that I was wanted to.
And that's I think a key is learning how to learn. This question is so intriguing to me for the two of us because we're both education professionals, right? So what is it about the education system in America that will make you successful? Is it an SAT score? No. Is it your GPA? No. Plenty of people have been successful, made money, had successful careers, successful lives without a GPA, without the SAT scores, without that. I think it all boils down to, and in my opinion, when we look at the question here, what is broken? I think it was broken as soon as we started funding public school on local property taxes. Because that automatically puts people in socioeconomic areas where socioeconomics is an issue. The poor people are already at a disadvantage.
That's very true.
Right? They have less resources, they have less funding, they have less incentive, they have less the quality of teachers coming into areas where poverty is an issue is going to affect everything. So as soon as we start funding public schools off local property taxes, we've already created a divide between the haves and the have-nots.
Wow, that's a
right?
great point.
So your geography and your socioeconomic status, I think, will be more of an indicator of success than your GPA and your SATs.
Oof. Wow, that's a good point. I guess I never really think about it as much as I should, but I know it's an issue. But again, I always went to schools where it wasn't an issue in my face.
Right.
It wasn't something I directly had to worry about.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I had to come to terms with very early on. My first teaching gig ever. And you've probably heard me tell stories about this because at York, where you and I first came in contact with each other, I worked in the education department there. And I was teaching intro to ed. But I had to come to terms very early on in my professional career, what was later deemed white privilege.
Yeah.
And people have a lot of issue with that. I don't. I get it, right? I was raised in an area where, we weren't rich, but I didn't ever have to worry.
Yeah.
My school was funded properly. My family was funded properly.
Yeah.
We didn't want for meals. We didn't want, I was able to be raised playing soccer. That's not cheap. So my first teaching gig ever, I'm in a school in Lubbock, Texas. But I picked a school that was the opposite of me. Intentionally.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see, I wanted to learn, I've been very intentional in my professional career about being outside myself, because I think that's important. Our education system is very good at what they do, but it's also very narrow focused, I think, at what they do.
That's such a good point too, because it's meant for a certain type of person, a certain learning style, a certain and just to
Absolutely.
assume that all of us, it's a one size fits all system. It's a total joke,
Right.
And it would be very interesting to see what it would look like to have equal or appropriate funding, maybe not equal, but like more appropriate funding, how these different communities would thrive differently or change in how they are, because I'm a huge believer that with appropriate education, like, communities can change.
Absolutely.
And so it would be very interesting to see how things.
People like me and you, we learn how to play the game.
So how do we fix that?
Oh.
It's another podcast for another day.
I don't know what the answer is in the United States. It's so deeply embedded in our culture, and we're seeing that so much right now on every level of politics, right versus left. Everything is just all this antagonistic movement against each other.
Yeah.
When most people just want to be treated fairly.
Yeah.
And that boils down, all that's embedded in, I think, deep-seated in our education system.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. It's the whole, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Well, it is broken. We need to fix it. I just don't think we know how.
Right.
Or we're too lazy to try.
Right.
Well, we finished question 1. Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Hey, cheers.
Nailed it.
Okay.
All right, great. Okay, so this one says, what do you wish you would have known when you were a young teacher just starting out?
Oh, geez. So we're sticking with education.
Yeah.
What do I wish I would have known as a young teacher starting out? How the system actually works. How to advocate for the students better. I think you mentioned it a little bit. I know in personal conversations you and I have had, you've been very kind with your words in that I advocate for students. I wish I would have figured that out earlier. Not to say I was bad at it, but I think I could have given. It's empowering, right? It's empowering. How do you empower students? Not how do you speak for them? How do you empower students to speak for themselves? How do you get them to be passionate about something? How do you and it's all, in my opinion, and this is something I wish I would have known my first year. I had a glimpse of it, but it's all relational.
Yes.
Education.
Amen.
Education is relational.
Yeah.
You can mandate, you can policy, you can whatever you want. If a teacher is not a good people person, if a teacher doesn't have social awareness, if a teacher doesn't understand social and cultural cues, implications, context, they're never going to connect to the student.
Yeah.
And then the student, you can't pull the fullness out of anybody if there's not relationship. It's that simple.
But what's the point? Like, why even be a teacher if you don't have a desire to build relationships with the people you're working with?
Power.
I guess that's true.
It's power. You look and okay, so that's a great question. One of the conversations that I've had probably once, I have at least once a year, maybe once a semester with different students, the difference between like K-12 and college, higher ed. The majority of your higher ed professors are not trained educators.
What is up with that? That is a whole nother conversation.
That's a whole nother conversation.
That, like, infuriates me.
They're trained in their discipline.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, I'll teach. They don't have a clue about pedagogy, methodology,
oh my gosh,
assessment, nothing, right?
It drives me nuts.
That's so higher ed to me is more of a power trip, an academic flex, than a K-12. But there's still a hand. You'll salt the K-12 environment power
Yeah.
people. I think higher ed is more a power issue than anything else, and a flexing an academic muscle. Maybe even how to navigate faculty that are there for the power as opposed to the people.
Yeah.
Oh, I kind of like that. As opposed to the people. If you're in education, you've got to be there for the people.
Exactly, and I think that's a really good point, because I don't wake up every day excited to, control seventh graders. I get up every day excited to
really
to do life with them, and I think I've picked an age of 7th grade, and those are my people, But
nobody in middle school is passionate about. I wasn't excited about 8th grade math.
No,
I was excited about
these weirdos
kids,
in my class.
Right. The kid that comes in and you're like, dude, you're a mess. Let's talk. Right?
Yes. Like, as you say that, like, faces are coming to my brain.
Pre-algebra is not my life goal. No.
I don't care really if you understand how the inner workings of the electoral college works, but I just want to hang out with you. I'll still explain it to you. You might forget.
I got
tomorrow.
your back, but yeah.
I can explain it to you. It's no problem. But
I got you, boo.
Ain't no problem.
It's not government.
I know, it's fine. I think that's really good. I think for me, what I wish I would have known, as someone who is a kid of a missionary, moved around a lot, right? I have this insane desire and perpetual need to be liked by people.
You still speak Spanish?
A little bit.
Okay. Sorry, that was a side note.
Yeah, that's right. So I have this strong innate desire to be liked by people, and I didn't really notice how big of a problem it was until I started not being liked by students. And that was my first year. I had this person who, one time I missed a class because I lost track of time. I was outside crying so much that I couldn't get this girl to like me, and it was her mission in life to make my life hell.
Sure.
And I just didn't really understand it, and everything I tried, it just didn't work. And finally, my principal, the one who oversaw me at the time, he just was like, "Not every kid's gonna like it all night. You need to get over it." And I was like, "Shoot, that's tough, hard truths."
Yeah,
those are hard truths, but it's true. And I think I stopped. My first probably 2 years, I really wrestled with being liked versus, kids will naturally like you when they respect you and they care that they know that you care about them. And so I had to shift the way I looked at kids first, versus kids to be won over, versus no, you're going to show up and do your job and love these kids, and whether they like you or not, you shouldn't lose any sleep over it. You have to be authentic. Exactly. Right. And they smell inauthenticity, and fear. Absolutely. from a mile away. Absolutely. And so, year 3 through 5 came around, and I stopped, needing approval from a 14-year-old, which is weird to say, but when you're a young teacher, it really matters, and stop caring about being the cool teacher and care about the teacher who builds relationships and shows up for them. And so, kids subsequently like you anyway, whether you're actually trying it or not. So I think I would have told, year 1, year 2 which I'm about to be I just finished year 8, I think, or I'm starting year 8. I know, you're old. I'm not old, you're old. That's another conversation. You helped make this, so that's on you. Anyway, so yeah, I think I would tell her to calm down. It's okay to have a few that don't like you, but do it for the ones who need, that person actually needed you the most, or probably, or those other kids in the room who do need your attention, who do need your love and support. So stop wasting it on kids who don't care, and show up for the ones who do. So that's probably what I would do. Interesting. I had one of my mentors from York College. Her name's Pat Simpson. Fantastic human being. Do you know Laurel Simpson? Yeah. Okay, her grandma. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, was one of my mentors. In a class one time, she said, if your students never see you smile, they won't care if you frown. Dang. Right? That's real. Yeah, and her whole intent there was, the authenticity. Let them see you laugh. Let them see you be silly. So I've always ridden this fine line with my students of
the relationship, right?
Yeah.
And some people have critiqued me harshly for that, which I don't care,
Yeah.
right? I'm going to let people see the real me.
Yeah.
Because I think then that opens the door for them to be the real them, right?
It's very true.
Like that space. It's I don't want to say safe space, right? But because that's a whole different context. But the ability to create a space where people feel safe enough to be themselves,
yeah,
even if it's in your classroom, is huge.
And even if you're one period of their 1 year out of 8 periods for 12 years of their career, it's like they felt safe and cared about, and especially in that one class. And that sticks with people. I mean, even, I had a few classes with you, but I mean, you were my first college class. It was a Monday, 8 a.m.
Really?
Freshman year.
Intro?
Yeah, intro to education. And like, you're my very first minute of college.
I don't know if I should apologize or...
Well, I'm still an educator, so I think 50% of that classroom aren't, so you can apologize to them.
So I failed them.
No, you actually were very clear and said, hey, some of you shouldn't be in this room.
Absolutely.
And you need to figure that out this
now.
class period.
Yep.
And like this week, this month, this
semester, whatever.
And you need to figure out and leave, because this is not for most of you. And
but that goes back to our first question with being what's part of the education system is I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say like, oh man, this is tough. Maybe I'll just quit my job and become a teacher.
Oh my God.
I'm like, but that's where I want to slap somebody, right?
Yes.
Like this is one of the most important jobs on the planet.
Yes.
And you're saying, oh, my job's tough. I'll just teach. Next question. Is it mine?
I think so.
Let's go. Anna. Question 2 for Anna Moyers.
Here we go.
Why do you prioritize? This is my radio voice, by the way.
Yeah, I hear it. It's nice.
Why do you prioritize spending time in nature?
That's a good question. I love it. I think that's number 1.
That is...
I love nature.
I gotta call out the host here on a cliche answer.
Okay, so what do I love about nature? I love that, I can just try to get myself away from distractions. I think it's a good reason to leave your phone in the car, try to find somewhere that has no service, and to just like find quiet and peace. That's usually where I do my best thinking, my best like hard decisions. Every major decision in my life I've done usually with a view of the mountains or something. Yeah, I think that would be number 1, but I think specifically like my happy place in Boulder, Colorado, Flagstaff, up past Chautauqua.
What did you just say?
Boulder.
Chautauqua? What's Chautauqua?
It's Chautauqua's a park, at the base of Flatirons, and
Got
then you
it.
drive
Okay.
up the Flatirons and then Flagstaff. Yes. So
By the way, my favorite word ever is Nishnabotna. Continue.
There's a fun factoid. So I really like feeling small. When I go up to a place as vast as like a large mountain range and you can see it for a long time, like to myself from somewhere else, another vantage point, I look like an ant. And sometimes it's nice to be reminded that you really are like an ant. And it kind of gives yourself some perspective, like calm down, God's got this. Calm down, like you're one person of 7 billion who've been around for a long time, like
millennia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That none of your problems are really new, or they're not really massive problems. They're just seem massive to you right now. And a lot of times I like to go there and reflect about the last time I was there, like whether it was a year before or whatever the problem was that I was freaking out about the last time I needed to get some space, and say, look, hey, that one solved, like it worked itself out, like God came through, amen, let's move on. And yeah, I think like, I don't know, just getting perspective and being like, hey, you're just one person, and like you don't need to fix the world, and the world doesn't need to be fixed for you today, but just enjoy this moment and give your problem to God and chill out.
Yeah.
So I think it allows me to kind of get my scream in, like of frustration,
primordial,
yeah, like just yell and be frustrated, but then also like, and then take in the silence and the vastness and the beauty of just like, okay, now calm down. And so I think that's why I like nature so much.
Cool.
Yeah. How about you?
So this is an interesting one because, so going back to the concept that I feel like I'm the product of a rocket scientist and mountain hippie.
Yeah.
So anytime growing up, my mom always had us outside.
Mm-hmm.
We were always outside doing something. So I don't know if it became a conscious thought until probably high school that, and you and I haven't talked in a while, but you keep referencing and mentioning, the work of God, and we prayed before we started.
Mm-hmm.
I have my entire life struggled with the concept of God and religion, especially in an organized sense. I do believe in a creative being.
Yeah.
I don't know what to name that.
Mm-hmm.
I think people have been wrestling with that since the dawn of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I connect to my creator through the created, which in my definition is, and this will make perfect sense to you knowing me, is people and nature.
Yeah.
Right?
That's great.
Like I'm here to connect to my creator through the created. So let's develop relationships and let's spend time outside. Everything you're saying, the vastness, the feeling of being so irrelevant and small in the grand scheme of time, of existence, of space, all of it is pretty humbling. And I'm really kind of arrogant sometimes, right? So that's, I prefer to call it confident. Some people have called it cocky in my life, but
whatever. Semantics.
Whatever. Semantics.
It's fine.
Potato, patata. That's whatevs. But that's honestly where so to me, outdoors, nature, has always been my spiritual place. It's where I don't view myself as religious. I don't know if I ever have, even though I've worked in private Christian higher ed for 20 plus years. But I do consider myself very spiritual. I think it's very different.
Yeah, that's interesting. How would you, I don't know, either encourage or how have you, watch your kids do that? And what I mean by that is like the fondness of nature and prioritizing that in a world full of busyness, in a world full of being on your phone. How have you supported like Aislinn and Jory through loving nature? Because they join you on a lot of your adventures.
Absolutely.
They seem to love it too. So how have you prioritized that in your fatherhood?
Indoctrination.
Forced.
So, for those of you listening, I have two wonderful children, Jory and Aislinn. They're both in college now. Jory,
congrats, by the way.
Thank you. I never bought into, and it's because of my mother, I never bought into the concept that when people say, oh, when you have kids, it changes your life. You can't do this. You can't. Bull crap.
Yeah.
You allow that to happen.
Wow.
They're two. Take them with you.
Yeah.
If they don't like it, keep going.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
like
pacifier and move on.
Because Jory and Aislinn didn't necessarily love every time. I remember one time I had this kind of kick butt backpack that held a kid in gear, and Aislinn was up in there, and half the hike she was crying. Okay, guess what? She's doing a hike with me the end of this month.
Come on.
Right? Like,
that's great.
Yeah. One of the best days of my life, we were up skiing, and I realized I didn't have to wait for them anymore.
Oh,
right?
That's so cool.
Yeah, like, but it's not easy at first. Yeah. Nothing about raising kids is easy, but then I think it turns back. It goes back to one year when I was coaching soccer. We had these T-shirts printed up, and it said "Passion is contagious." So I've modeled, and you said it earlier, like this leadership by example. I've modeled for my kids that it's fun.
But it's so beautiful. And also I think it's one thing to see nature through your own eyes. It's another thing to watch a child discover how cool it is.
Exactly.
So I think that's a whole nother level.
So here's something that's cool too. So when I just had to retell this story to Aislinn. When she was 9 or 10, I can't remember, and this always just blows me away. I asked her one year what she wanted for Christmas. She's 9 or 10, and I promise you, I'm not making this up. She said, "I don't know, Dad. I don't really need anything." She's freaking 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are we doing, right? So I made a decision that Christmas that from there forward, Christmas and birthdays would be experiences.
Yeah.
Right? So I just turned 50.
You're
right?
old.
I know. Shut it. And the kids took me kayaking.
Oh, cool.
And Aislinn, we're having dinner the night before we go out, and she looks at me. She goes, "Hey, Dad, just to let you know, in true Chris Luther fashion, your birthday present is going to be an experience, not a thing."
Great.
I'm like, perfect.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just creating that model for him.
I mean, you can't take things with you. You know.
Right.
It's only experiences, and I think that's beautiful. I have a couple friend who does that for anniversaries. They don't give each other gifts. They plan an adventure, and I think that that's really cool. And I hope I could do the same with my future husband. It's just like I want to do rad stuff with you. That's important, you know. And I love that you've taught your kids that at a young age. You know, it always important.
It's what you show them you value.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Because when I go, do I want my kids to have a watch or a heirloom or a thing, or do I want them to be able to sit around and tell stories about when Dad and I did this?
Yeah.
Right?
That's really cool.
And that's what I would rather them have.
For sure.
Are those memories.
That's really important. So good for you if you're doing that.
Yeah.
Cool. What has been your craziest day, one day, as a coach or an educator? And I'll go first because I can think of mine already. Is that okay?
Okay.
Cool. So in hindsight, it's funny. But in the moment, it was not. It was a day we had a bomb threat at school.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I am always reminded that as educators, we always have to be willing to die to protect our children.
Whoa.
And I don't know if that sinks in on any other day.
Whoa. Yeah.
Except lockdown day. You know, when you have lockdown drills, that I have to be the one closest to the door. I have to be the one who throws my body in front of an active shooter in case that does happen. And I get very stressed out, and I take it very seriously. And you can ask any of my students who've ever been in my class on a lockdown drill. Oh, we do not joke around at this time, because, like, I will have to die first, you know? Right. And I'm more than happy to. Like, I am, you know? I love you if you're in my classroom, whether I like you or don't. I love you. And so I think that's something you know, just have in the kind of the background of your mind. But the day that it was the most real was we had a bomb threat in our school, and so we had to. Where
is this stateside or is this in Rwanda?
Yeah, this is in Grand Island, Nebraska.
Okay.
And so, you know, I think this was year 2 for me.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
So you're young.
Yeah, I'm pretty young, and so I'm having to escort my students to the high school, which is just like 2 blocks away, and I'm like, it's a bomb, like. I feel like we're gonna die no matter which school we're at, but okay, sure. Like,
they're pretty boomy.
Yeah, I don't really think that this is gonna be sufficient. But again, like, I'm having to put on a brave face, like everything is fine, to my humans, and meanwhile, like, I am freaking out. And then I have to look to my mentor educators to kind of look and see if I can get any glimpse of what they're feeling. But they're doing the exact same thing of putting on a stoic face and acting like everything's fine. Come to find out, it was someone brought an accordion to school to show their band teacher, but left it on his desk with no note, no information as to what it was, and it looked very nondescript. And so he just followed protocol, and we have a police officer at our school all the time, and so he said, well, this is the protocol. If you can't open it, you can't touch it. Like, anyway, it was an accordion, and so, like, the whole thing was just one big joke. It's funny now.
Well, it's crazy. Well, the question was crazy. Yeah. So that's crazy, right? Like an accordion. Yeah.
A crazy day. But I went home that day after, you know, all the kids were picked up, and then I go home and I just weep. Like, I have delayed my fear of all of the kids I love dearly could have just died, and myself. You know what I mean? And all of my favorite colleagues and all of these people, how many people could have just died? And so I think that was one of the most emotionally exhausting days of my life. And then, you know, once the community found out that it was an accordion, it was like one big joke. And I'm like, but we still could have died. Like, we still had to almost die for your children and die for whatever the reason for that happening. And I think, like, it's days like those that you remember, like, I am the grown-up in charge. I have to go first. You know what I mean? And I think it's a lot for
it's an unwritten code.
It is. And it's a lot for a 22-year-old or whatever, fresh out the gate, to have to be faced with. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that was my craziest day as a teacher.
So this question is very difficult for me to respond to because I've had a fairly long career.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of things. My 16-year-old 8th grader, the day I find out that he's got an electric leg monitor on because he's awaiting trial for attempted murder, right? That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That's at 22, 23 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I was teaching when 9/11 happened.
Dang.
Right? Like that's crazy. I'm coaching. And coaching. We've qualifying for nationals.
That's so cool.
On these different levels with multiple times, right? In different school settings. I'm coaching one night, and Jory Nason's mom and I get a message that her granddad or mom and her aunt have been in this horrific car accident, and it's right after a game. And it's like, okay, this is crazy. We just had this great win, and now what do we do, right? So I'm just kind of going through like all these different snapshots of, God, there's been a lot of like very interesting things happen. We had an active shooter scare one time, and similar to what you're thinking. So it's kind of hard to define, but again, I think that's kind of the beauty of why you and I do what we do, is this whole mosaic, like all these different people and experiences, and no day is the same, right? So how to define the craziest? Because even in your story and what that did and meant to you, you've got others.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
For sure.
You've got other stories. You've got other days that are crazy. And it's just this life of experiences where you're like, God, in any normal setting, that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. It's just
right?
It's a Tuesday.
Yeah,
Let's talk about Thursday.
And in the education world, it's like, what's going on today? It's Thursday. Like
It's whatever.
Yeah, it's whatever. What is it about sports that has changed your outlook on life?
Yeah. So I love sports. I mean, I played volleyball and soccer, or football. I'm international now,
Oh yeah, you're
football.
savvy now.
So I played team sports. I ran track like once, and I wasn't in for it. Like,
I'm good.
It was a pass, but thanks. But I love team sports, and I love like a collective struggle. I think that's beautiful. But I think what I see in a bigger scope is how sports like brings people together. I probably hyper romanticize the Olympics. Like I love the Olympics, and I just think it is so cool that people from all around the world come together to celebrate a sport, and whether it's like the javelin or skeet shooting, or if it's volleyball or soccer or basketball, and it's just so cool that it's like a universal language, and I have watched soccer be played in 4 or more continents live.
That's cool.
And like the fact that I can see like this is the same sport that is being played, the same rules. I understand offsides in all languages. Like I understand, which is a hard concept to understand.
That's a hard concept.
So I don't know if you watched Ted Lasso. Have you seen that show yet?
Not very little.
You have
very
to.
little.
It's so funny. It's an American football coach going to the UK to coach
EPL, right?
Yeah, regular football.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because one time he was yelling at the ref and he's like, what the heck? That's not offside, or is that offsides? And he's like, yeah. He's like, well, can you explain it to me? I really don't know.
I'm not really sure what it is.
I was like, yeah. As a defender, you kind of have to know what.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just beautiful. It's almost like romantic in a way to see that no matter what language you speak, you can still unite and play a game. And that anyone can play. Like, you don't need to be wealthy. I mean, yeah, it can be an expensive sport, but you can get a soccer ball.
Right.
Or make one and unite the whole community, unite the whole area you live in, the village you live in, and come together over a game.
Sure.
And I mean, I think soccer is the most universal, so I think that's why it stands out so much, and it's something that we both have in common. But just any sport in general, like you can say, yeah, I play volleyball, and you're like, oh my gosh, me too. Like, what position do you play?
Right.
And like, blah blah blah, and whatever. And it's just beautiful, like people who like sports. Now, I don't really necessarily understand like sports fanatics very much. I think that's a little too much for me. People who get angry when their team loses, like, don't talk to me for a week kind of people. I'm like, hey, I'm not really here for that. Also, like, you're putting too much pressure in the hands of a 25-year-old.
Right.
I don't really understand that.
Exactly.
But I think people who enjoy playing the sport, you kind of see the world differently because it's just beautiful. It's something that brings people together.
Yeah. The spectator versus the participant versus
For
the...
sure.
Okay, so sports and my outlook on life, this is where, and I don't think a lot of people know this, this is where kind of my underlying, it kind of weaves with my underlying obsession with wolves.
Okay,
right?
let's hear it.
It's the whole pack concept. So Rudyard Kipling has a poem called The Law of the Jungle, and in it, one of the stanzas says, for the strength of the wolf is the pack, and the strength of the pack is the wolf. Okay, so in order for the pack to be strong, the individual members have to be strong. In order for the individual members to be strong, the pack has to be strong.
Yeah.
That's team sports. Yeah. Right? If you want a solid, successful program, the culture has to be good. The team has to understand that each individual member has to be successful for the team to be successful. Yeah. So it's the whole in experiential education, we call it a full value contract. Everybody who is involved in the experience is of full value to the experience being successful. Yeah. Right? So if you and I are out doing something experiential, if you fail, then we fail. Yeah. Right? So that's kind of team sports has kind of molded my outlook on life in that sense. And then there's always the sense of community, the shared obstacles, the disappointment, the heartache, the joy, the elation.
Yeah, so much life.
Yeah, and again the relations. Yeah. Right. Some of the best relationships I currently have are all connected to sport. All right. Well, I think that is our last question. Now, my real last question that I like to ask people is, what is it about life that like keeps you up at night? You know, what is it that frustrates you about our world? And just pick one. Okay. Yeah, just one. And oh, geez. What either are you doing about it, or would you like to encourage the listeners to do about it? One of my, so this is probably more recent, but it connects into a bigger scheme. I don't know if scheme's the right word. A bigger sense, maybe. Merlin, stop, please. I do not get how 80% of evangelical Christians voted for Donald Trump. Let's go there. I don't understand how anybody who looks at and tries to interpret New Testament Christianity for themselves can look at some of the major leaders in the Republican Party currently, and I'm not saying Republican as far as an ideology, I'm saying Trumpers, and think any of it's okay. There's no empathy, there's no compassion. Okay, so I wrote this thought process in October of 2017. Yeah. Okay. If you're a New Testament Christian, you look at 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 6. Yeah. He's not patient. He's not kind. He envies. He boasts. He's proud. He dishonors others. He's self-seeking. He's easily angered. He keeps record of wrongs. And he delights in evil. And we have a multitude of people who claim Christ, who follow him. What did Jesus say? Love the Lord your God. Love your neighbor. That's it. It's that simple. Right? Yeah. That's my biggest. What am I doing about it? I try to live my life by what I think love looks like. I want people to be authentic around me. I don't care what you identify as, who you identify as. I don't care who you love. I don't care. So therefore, semicolon, I'm not going to hold my government to a standard of judging people for that.
Yeah. I think what really frustrates me is, look, you can believe whatever it is that you want to believe. In fact, that's like you said, one of the greatest parts of our nation.
Right.
Is you can believe everything and nothing, and that's fine.
Right.
But you, first off, cannot go around hurting people, and that comes verbally. Like, you have freedom of speech unless it hurts someone. And I think that's number one. I think also Donald Trump's words have hurt a lot of people, you know, and caused a lot of fear and caused a lot of pain in people's lives and whatever. But you're actively choosing this man who has hurt so many people to be, like, in public office. And not that I'm saying that, you know, the Democratic Party is the right party at all.
No,
like,
not at all.
They have their massive issues, but since when did being a Christian mean that you're a Republican?
Right.
You know, and since when is that just because I'm not a Republican, am I a heathen?
Right.
Are you kidding me? Like, what? Like, you
It's
know,
American politics
Jesus
for you.
called us to be troublemakers. Like, why would I want to fit in with what you have to say? But also, like, I just don't understand people who vote party line. And I think that part of politics really frustrates me. Like, there are so many people who vote, you know, just look for all the R's down the page and just circle those
and just
bubbles.
circle them.
And I'm like, no, like, do your research, you know?
Here is the wisdom of the wolf.
Okay, great. Let's hear it.
Turn off extreme left and extreme right media. Go to the center. That's where you're going to get your most accurate information. Love your neighbor. If you believe in God, love your God. Scripture says to love your neighbor as yourself. Take some time to figure out who you are. Yeah. Right? And figure out how to love yourself. Because if you're treating your neighbor like crap, I don't know if you really love yourself. So just be a decent person. Like, it's not that difficult.
It's really not.
It's not, right?
Right.
Like just don't treat people bad. It's not that hard. And so yeah, I don't have an active campaign, but just create space where people can be themselves, love people. Don't cast judgment, right? Like, you can judge actions, because we all do that, right? You walk into a room, I'm going to judge you. Yeah. But where it gets to a sinful nature is when we start to then think that we are somehow better than or holier than or that. We have safety mechanisms. I'm going to judge actions. I'm going to judge words. I'm going to do all that. It's fine. But when you cast judgment, I think that's a little different. So just watch yourself.
You better check yourself. And if you're not sure, check twice.
Yes.
Anyway, awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in with myself and my guest, Chris Luther.
Right.
Thank you for being interesting and getting to the point with us. We'll see you guys next time here on Cut the Chit Chat with Anna Moyers. Until then, make good choices, be good people, and remember, God loves you.
I love it.